One bad sensor on a Ram truck can trigger 6 warning lights at the same time, and if you own the 6.7 Cummins, one of those sensors costs over $1,000 to replace at the dealer. These are the sensors that fail the most on your Ram, and the ones you can actually save with a 5-minute cleaning. Number 1. The Camshaft Position Sensor. If there is one sensor I replace more than any other on Ram trucks, this is it. It sits on the passenger side of the timing chain cover on your Hemi, and on the back of each valve cover on the Pentastar. When it dies, your truck might crank for 5 to 8 seconds before starting, stall within a couple of miles after a cold start, or just refuse to fire at all. Now here is the part that drives me crazy. I have seen Ram owners replace this sensor 2 or 3 times chasing the same problem, and the sensor was never the issue. On the Hemi especially, there is a small wire in the connector pigtail that breaks internally. You cannot see it from the outside. That broken wire is what is actually causing the code. Before you buy a new sensor, inspect that pigtail or just replace it. The repair pigtail is about $15 and it saves you from going in circles. And always buy the original Mopar sensor. Aftermarket camshaft position sensors on these trucks have a terrible track record. I have pulled brand new aftermarket ones that failed in less than a month. The original part is around $30 to $45, and it actually lasts. Number 2. The MAP sensor. This is the one almost nobody thinks to clean. I clean this sensor on almost every Ram that comes through the shop with a rough idle, and 9 times out of 10 the owner had no idea this was even a thing. Your Ram does not use a mass airflow sensor like a lot of other trucks. Instead, the MAP sensor on top of the intake manifold handles figuring out how much air the engine is getting. Over time, oil vapors from the PCV system coat the guts of the sensor, and your fuel economy drops, the idle gets rough, and the truck just does not feel as responsive as it used to. The fix takes about 5 minutes. Pull the sensor off the intake manifold, spray the inside of it with electronics cleaner, let it dry, and put it back on. On the 6.7-liter Cummins, this same sensor is called the boost pressure sensor, and it gets contaminated by EGR carbon. Same deal. Clean it first, replace it later if cleaning does not solve it. The part is only about $25 to $60, but the cleaning is free and works more often than you would think. Now those first 2 are cheap fixes. This next one can actually damage your engine if you let it go. Number 3. The oil pressure sending unit. I personally think this is the most misunderstood sensor on the Hemi because owners treat it like a gauge problem and ignore it. On the 5.7, the computer trusts whatever that sensor says and uses the reading to decide how hard to run the oil pump and when to activate the MDS system. If the sensor starts sending bad numbers, the computer might reduce oil pump output based on pressure that is not real. That means less oil getting to the top end of the engine, and over time that can make the infamous Hemi tick even worse. I worked on a truck last year where the owner drove around for months with a bouncing oil pressure gauge, thinking it was just an electrical glitch. By the time he brought it in, the top end was already making noise. Symptoms are easy to spot. Your oil pressure gauge will jump to maximum or drop to 0 for no reason. Before you panic, throw a mechanical gauge on the engine to confirm your actual pressure is fine. If the real pressure is good, replace the sending unit. On the Hemi, it is right above the oil filter, easy to get to. On the Pentastar though, it sits under both the upper and lower intake manifold. So a $38 part turns into a 4 to 6 hour job. If you are going in there, do your spark plugs and serpentine belt at the same time. Number 4, the electronic throttle body. If you have ever turned the key on your Ram and seen a little lightning bolt icon on the dash, you have met this one. The throttle position sensor is built into the throttle body, so when it acts up, the whole unit usually needs attention. This is extremely common on 2003 through 2013 models. But here is what I tell every Ram owner before they spend up to $400 on a new throttle body. Check two things first. Clean the throttle body, because carbon buildup is the cause more often than an electrical failure. Look at the wiring about 6 inches behind the connector. There is a spot where the wires rub against the air resonator box and chafe through over time. That chafed wire creates the exact same symptoms as a dead throttle body, and I have saved customers hundreds of dollars just by wrapping it in electrical tape and heat shrink. After any throttle body service, you need to do a relearn procedure or the idle will be all over the place. Everything I have covered so far is annoying, but the parts are cheap. This next one can empty your bank account. Number 5. The NOx sensor on the 6.7 Cummins. Cummins owners, this one is for you, and I am not going to sugarcoat it. The upstream NOx sensor monitors exhaust emissions before the emissions catalyst, and it is one of the most expensive sensor replacements on any truck. The part alone costs $800 to $1,000, and installed you are looking at $1,200 to $2,000 depending on the shop. What makes it worse is these fail repeatedly. I have had customers go through 3 of these in under 20,000 miles. When it fails, you get the exhaust system service required message, and then the DEF countdown timer starts. 200 miles, then 150, then 100, and then your truck goes into 5 miles per hour limp mode. But here is the part that can save you thousands. There is an extended warranty recall that covers the NOx sensor, the emissions catalyst, the DEF injector, and several other emissions parts. Coverage runs through the end of 2033 or 120,000 miles, whichever comes first. Call your Ram dealer and ask them to check your VIN for recall coverage. I have seen owners get reimbursed thousands for repairs they already paid out of pocket. If you are finding this helpful so far, hit subscribe. I cover Ram maintenance tips every week that save you real money. Number 6. The oxygen sensor. Your 5.7 Hemi has 4 oxygen sensors total, 2 upstream and 2 downstream. They typically start failing around 80,000 to 120,000 miles. Here is the tip that saves you from pulling your hair out. The Hemi does not play nice with one very popular sensor brand. I am not going to name names, but if your oxygen sensor comes in a blue box from a major parts store, there is a good chance the check engine light comes right back within a week. Stick with NTK or original Mopar sensors and you will not have this problem. Also, before you replace any oxygen sensor on a Hemi, check your exhaust manifold bolts. Broken manifold bolts are incredibly common on these engines, and an exhaust leak triggers oxygen sensor codes that have nothing to do with the sensor itself. I have seen so many oxygen sensors replaced unnecessarily because nobody checked the manifold first. After that NOx sensor bill, you are going to like this next one because it is one of the cheapest and easiest fixes on the entire Cummins. Number 7. The exhaust back pressure sensor on the Cummins. This sensor monitors exhaust pressure between the manifold and the turbo, and it has a small metal tube that clogs with soot over time. When it clogs, your fuel economy drops, the exhaust brake stops working properly, and the turbo cannot do its job. The cleaning process is simple. Pull the reference tube off, run a pipe cleaner and thin wire through it, clean the sensor port, and reinstall everything. I have seen this fix bring fuel economy back from 9 miles per gallon to over 17 on trucks where the owner thought something major was wrong. The whole job takes 20 minutes and costs you nothing. If cleaning does not work, the replacement sensor runs about $75 to $150, which is pocket change compared to other Cummins sensor repairs. Number 8. The crankshaft position sensor. This sensor tells the computer how fast the engine is spinning and exactly where it is in its cycle. When it fails, and this is usually heat related, the engine just dies while you are driving. The tachometer drops to 0, and the truck will not restart until the sensor cools down, which can take an hour or two on the side of the road. On the 2016 Ram 1500 specifically, there was a federal recall issued because the magnetic material on the tone wheel was separating from the flex plate. That is a much bigger repair because it requires pulling the transmission to get to the flex plate. If you own a 2016, check whether that recall was completed on your truck. For all other years, the sensor itself is located on the passenger side of the block near the transmission bell housing. The tricky part is these sensors love to seize in the bore from heat and corrosion. I have snapped a couple of these trying to pull them out, and trust me, fishing a broken sensor out of the block is not how you want to spend your Saturday. Spray it with penetrating oil the day before you plan to replace it. Let it soak overnight. That one step saves a lot of headaches. I have been working on these trucks for a long time, and the one thing I wish every Ram owner knew is this. Before you replace any sensor on your Ram, check the wiring first. More than half the time the sensor is fine, and the real problem is a broken connector, a chafed wire, or a corroded ground. A $5 wiring repair beats a $500 sensor swap every time. If you want to see which Ram maintenance mistakes cost owners the most money, that video is on screen right now.